You know what time it is? Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! We're back with Storytime. It's a little different today. We're in my room today. I don't often do Storytime in my room. It's comfy, and the acoustics of the room are very helpful for this type of work, so I was very enthused to switch it up today. And no, I don't own the music that you're listening to in the background, which is brought to you by Ambient World Academy. Check them out on YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe. And as I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max, relax, and chillaxing time, meme time, between time, scheme time, in between time, study time, break time, CP time, anytime. But you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. So you all will have to forgive me because I have gained this, what I consider to be a bad habit. I was at the gym earlier today and I had a stick of gum. I like to chew gum when I work out because it helps me concentrate. Gum is not something that I keep on me like all day, every day. Even when I was a kid, I didn't. Well, I was really fond of juicy fruit. I was really fond of juicy fruit gum. Fun fact. When I was a kid, like, that was the thing. Maybe it was the commercials. Maybe it was the yellow, beautiful, colorful wrapping. I don't know. I just loved juicy fruit. And it was tasty. But one thing about gum that I still, to this day, have a frustration with is that the flavor doesn't last. It's not like Willy Wonka's Everlasting Gobstoppers. The flavor of gum may not lose its elasticity, but it loses the juicy flavor that I adore. But enough of that rabble. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is very different for me because I can hear myself, but I'm not even near the camera. Excuse me, the mic. There we go. All right. This is going to be very fun. Thank goodness. Yes. Sorry about that. Ah! It's okay. I'm falling apart. If I could forget him, I would. Please believe me. Alright, no more vocals. Let's get to reading. Uh-oh. Did I? I think I did skip a chapter. Hold on. Just trying to find my place. There we go. Chapter 10. The Coming of Pryderi. Or Prydain Pryderi. There we go. So, we were alluded to a group of characters that are on the same level of Prince Gwydion. So, the House of Dawn, and the ruler of the House of Dawn is Prince Gwydion's father, King Math. And he's the leader of the House of Dawn. They're like a very prestigious, noble household of knights. But there's apparently another household of knights called the Kingdom of Pryderi, which is very oddly close to Prydain, which is where these stories are set. So, let's get into these new characters we're going to meet. Actually, boom. Cardathel was an armed camp where sparks like blazing snowflakes whirled from the armorer's forges. Its wide-spreading courtyards rang from the iron-shod hooves of war horses and the sharp notes of signal horns. Although the companions were now safe within its walls, the Princess Eilonwy declined to engage her warrior's rough garb for more befitting attire. The more she agreed to do, and the most she agreed to do, but reluctantly, was to wash her hair. A few ladies of the court remained, the rest having been sent to the protection of the eastern strongholds, but Eilonwy flatly refused to join them in their spinning and weaving chambers.
Athol may be the most glorious castle in Prydain, she declared, but court ladies are court ladies wherever you find them, and I've had more than my share with Queen Teleria's hen flock. Listening to their giggling and gossiping, why, it's worse than having your ears tickled with feathers. For the sake of being a princess, I've been half drowned with soapy water, and that's quite enough. My hair still feels clammy as seaweed. As for skirts, I'm comfortable just as I am. I've lost all my robes anyway, and I certainly shan't bother to be measured for others. The clothes I'm wearing will do very nicely.
No one is considered asking me whether my clothing is suitable, Glue testily remarked, although the former giant's garments, as far as Tarn could judge, were in better repair than those of the companions. There we go. I'm going to use this pillow as a base so I can... There we go. Thank you, Forest Spirit. Which, if you can't tell from my bed covering, yes, it's the Forest Spirit from Princess Mononoke. It's great. One of my favorite films of all time. Actually, one of my favorite Hayao Miyazaki films of all time. One of, not the. That goes to a different movie. There we go. As far as Tarn could judge, were in better repair than those of the companions. But shabby treatment is something I've grown used to. In my cavern when I was a giant, things were much different. Generosity? Alas, gone forever. Now I recall when the bats and I... Tarn had neither strength to dispute Eilonwe's words nor time to listen to Glue's. Gwydion, hearing of the companions' arrival, had summoned Tarn to the Hall of Thrones, where Cole, Fluder, and Gurgi secured gear and provisions for the warriors who would journey with them. Tarn followed a guard to the hall, finding Gwydion in council with Math, son of Mathanwe. Tarn hesitated to draw closer, but Math beckoned to him, and Tarn dropped to one knee before the white-bearded ruler. The High King touched Tarn's shoulder with a hand withered but firm, and bade him rise. But since the battle between the Sons of Dawn and the armies of the Horned King, had Tarn been in the presence of Math, son of Mathanwe, and he saw the years had borne heavily upon the monarch of the royal house. The face of Math was even more careworn and more deeply furrowed than Dalbin's. Upon his brow the gold crown of Dawn seemed a cruel burden, yet his eyes were keen and filled with stern pride. More than this, Tarn sensed a sorrow so profound that his own heart grieved, and he bowed his head. Give me a moment. I'm trying to think of how I want King Math to sound, because this will be the first time he speaks in the novels, hence the title, The High King. To a point. Face me, assistant pigkeeper, Math commanded in a quiet voice. Fear not to see what I myself know. The hand of death reaches toward mine, and I am not loath to clasp it. I have long heard the horn of Gwyn the hunter, that summons even a king to his barrow home. With a glad heart would I answer it, said Math, for a crown is a pitiless master, harsher than the staff of a pigkeeper. While a staff bears up, a crown weighs down beyond the strength of any man to wear it lightly. What grieves me is not my death, but at the end of my life to see blood spilled in the land where I sought only peace. You know the history of our royal house, how long the Sons of Dawn voyaged in their golden ships to Prydain, and how men sought their protection against Auror Deathlord, who had robbed Prydain of its treasures and turned a rich fair land into a fallow field. Since then the Sons of Dawn have stood as a shield against the ravages of Anuvin, but if the shield now be riven, then all shatters with it. We will gain victory, Gwydion said. The Lord of Anuvin stakes all upon this venture, but his strength is also his weakness, for it may be that, if we withstand him, his power will shatter forever. Good tidings, as well as bad, have reached us, Gwydion went on. For the latter, King Smoit and his armies are embattled in the valley of Yestrad. He cannot, for all his boldness, force his way farther northward before the end of winter. He serves us well, nonetheless, since his warriors engage the traitors among the southern lords, and keep them from joining Arorn's other battle hosts. The more distant kings in the northern realms come but slowly, for winter to them is a sterner enemy than Arorn. More heartening is word that the armies of the west domains are but a few days' march from our stronghold. Scouts have already sighted them. It is a host greater than any ever raised in Prydain, and Sword Predery himself commands them. He has done all I prayed from him and more. My only unease is that Arorn's liegemen may give battle and turn him aside before he reaches Cardathel. But if so, we will have warning, and our forces will march to relieve him. Not least among our good tidings, Gwydion added, a smile lightening his drawn and haggard features, is the coming of Tarin of Cardalbin, the warriors led from the Kamoth. I have counted heavily upon them, and shall ask still more. Gwydion spoke then of the ordering of Tarin's horsemen and unmounted troops. The High King listened closely and nodded his agreement. "Go now to your task," said Math to Tarin, "for the day is come when an assistant pigkeeper must help bear the burden of a king." During the days that followed, the companions served wherever need arose, and as Gwydion commanded them, even Glue shared to some extent in the toil at the forceful insistence of Flute or Flam, and not through his own choice. Under the watchful eye of Heaven the smith, the former giant was set to pumping bellows at the forges, where he had command stingingly at the blisters on his pudgy hands. More than a stronghold of war, Cardathel was a place of memory and a place of beauty. Within its bastions, at the farther reaches of one of its many courtyards, grew a living glade of tall hemlocks, and among them rose mounds of honor to ancient kings and heroes. Halls of carved and ornamented timbers held panoplies of weapons of long and noble lineage, and banners whose emblems were famed in the songs of the bards. In other buildings were stored treasures of craftsmanship, sent from every country and Kamoth and Prydain. There Tarin saw, with a twinge of heart, a beautifully fashioned wine jar from the hands of Anlaw Clayshaper, who, if you remember from the previous chapter, lost his life being attacked by the huntsmen of Anuvan. The companions, when spared from their tasks, found much of wonder and delight. Cole had never before journeyed to Cardathel, and he could not help staring at the archways and towers that seemed to soar higher than the snow-capped mountains beyond the walls. "Handsome enough it all is," Cole admitted, "and skillfully worked, but the towers make me think of my apple trees should have been better pruned, and left to itself. My garden will yield as much as the stones of this courtyard." A man called out to them and beckoned from the doorway of one of the smallest and plainest of the buildings. He was tall, his face deeply weathered, white hair fell straight to his shoulders, the coarse cloak of a warrior was flung loosely about him, but neither sword nor dagger hung at his unadorned leather belt. As the companions followed, Fluter ran instantly to the man, and heedless of the snow, dropped to one knee before him. "Perhaps it is I who should bow to you, Fluter Flab, son of Godo," said the man, smiling, "and ask your pardon." He turned to his companions and offered his hand. "I know you better than you know me," he said, and laughed good-heartedly at their surprise. "My name is Taliesin." "The chief bard of Prydain," said Fluter, beaming proudly and delightedly, "made me a gift of my harp. I am in his debt." "Of that I am not altogether sure," replied Taliesin, as the companions followed him through the doorway and into a spacious chamber lightly furnished with only a few sturdy seats and benches, and a long table of curiously grained wood that glowed in the light of a cheery hearth fire. Ancient volumes stacked in rolls of parchment crowded the walls and rose high into the shadows of the raftered ceiling. "Yes, my friend," the chief bard said to Fluter, "I have thought often of that gift. Indeed, it has been a little of my conscience." He gave the bard a glance that was shrewd but filled with kindness and good humor. Tarn at first had seen Taliesin as a man of many years. Now he could not guess the chief's bard's age. Taliesin's features, though heavily lined, seemed filled with strange mixture of ancient wisdom and youthfulness. He wore nothing to betoken his rank, and Tar realized that there was no need for such adornment. Like Adion, his son and Tarn's companion of long ago, his eyes were gray, deep-set, seeming to look beyond what they see, and there was in the chief bard's voice and face a sense of authority far greater than a war leader's and more commanding than a king's. "I knew the nature of the harp when I gave it to you," the chief bard continued, "and now your own nature suspected that you would always have some small trouble with the strings." "Trouble?" cried Fluter. "Why, not a bit of it. Never for a moment 2 strings broke with such a twang that Gurgi started in alarm." Fluter's face turned bright red to the tip of his nose. "The fact of the matter is as I stop and think on it, the old pots force me to tell the truth. Shall we say a little more than I normally would, but it does occur to me telling the truth has harmed no one, least of all myself." Taliesin smiled. "Then you have learned no small lesson. Nonetheless, my gift was in jest, yet not entirely in jest. Yes, perhaps the laughter of one heart to another. But you have bore it willingly. Now I offer you any of your choosing," he said. Taliesin pointed to a shelf where stood a number of harps, some newer, some older, and a few even more gracefully carved than the instrument Fluter carried. With a joyful cry, Fluter hastened to them, lovingly touching the strings of each, admiring the workmanship, turning from one to the next and back again. He hesitated some while, looking dolefully at the newly broken strings of his own instrument, and at the scratches and chips scarring the frame. Yes, well, you do honor me," he murmured in some confusion. "But this old pot is quite good enough for me. There are times, I swear, when it seems to play of itself. None has a better tone. When the strings are fixed, that is, it sits well against my shoulder. Not to belittle these, but what I mean is that somehow we're used to each other. Yes, I'm most grateful, but I would not change it." "So be it, then," replied Taliesin. And you others," the chief bard added to the companions, "you have seen many of the treasures of Cardathel, but have you seen its true pride and priceless treasure? It is here," he said, quietly gesturing around the chamber. "Stored in this hall of lore is much of Predane's ancient language. Although Aurora Deathlord robbed men of their craft secrets, he could not gain the songs and sayings of our bards. Here they have been carefully gathered. Of your songs, my gallant friend," he said to Fluter, "there are not a few. Memory lives longer than what it is remembers," Taliesin said, "and all men share the memories and wisdom of all others. Below this chamber lie even richer troves," he smiled. "Like poetry itself, the greater part is the most deeply hidden. There, too, is the Hall of Bards. Alas, Fluter Flam," he said regretfully, "none but a true bard may enter, though one day perhaps you will join our company." "Oh, wisdom of noble bards!" cried Gurgi, his eyes popping in wonderment. "It makes humble Gurgi's poor tender head spin with whirlings and twirlings. Alas, alas, for he has no wisdom, but he would go without crunchings and munchings to gain it." Taliesin put a hand on the creature's shoulder. "Do you believe you have none?" he asked. "That is not true. Of wisdom there are as many partners as a loom can weave. Yours is the wisdom of a good and kindly heart. Search, and scarce it is, its worth all the greater. Such as that of Cole, son of Colfer," said the chief bard, "and added therefore to the wisdom of the earth, the gift of waking barren ground and causing the soil to flourish in a rich harvest." "My garden does that labor, not I," said Cole, his bald crown turning pink from both pleasure and modesty. "And as I recall the state I left it in, I shall wait long for another harvest, whatever."
I was going to gain wisdom on the Isle of Mona, put in Eilonwy. That's why Dolphin sent me there. All I learned was needlework, cooking, and curtsying.
Learning is not the same as wisdom, Taliesin interrupted with a kindly laugh. In your veins, princess, flows the blood of the enchantresses of Lyr. Your wisdom may be the most secret of all, for you know without knowing, even as the heart itself knows how to beat. Alas for my own wisdom, said Taran. I was with your son when he met his death. He gave me a brooch of great power, and while I wore it, there was much I understood, and much that was hidden grew to me. The brooch is no longer mine, if ever truly was. What I know, what I knew then, I remember only as a dream lingering beyond my power to grasp it. A shade of sorrow passed over Taliesin's face. There are those, he said gently, who must first learn loss, despair, and grief. Of all paths to wisdom, this is the cruelest and longest. Are you the one who must follow such a way? This even I cannot know. If you are, take heart nonetheless. Those who reach the end do more than gain wisdom. As rough wool becomes cloth in a crude clay, a vessel, so do they change and fashion wisdom for themselves, and what they give back is greater than what they won. Taran was about to speak, but the notes of a signal horn rang from the middle tower, and shouts rose from the guardians of the turrets. Watchers cried out the sighting of King Pedri's battle host. Taliesin led the companions up a broad flight of stone steps, where from atop the Hall of Lore they could see beyond the walls of the fortress. Taran could only glimpse the gleaming of the westering sun and the ranks of spears across the valley. Then mounted figures broke away from the mass and galloped across the snow-flecked expanse. Against the rolling meadow, the leading rider of the band was sharply brilliant in trappings of crimson, black, and gold, and sunlight sparkled on his golden helmet. Taran could watch no longer, for guards were shouting the names of the companions, summoning them to the great hall. Catching up the banner of the white pig, Gurgi hastened after Taran. The companions quickly made their way to the great hall. A long table had been placed there, and at its head sat Math and Gwydion. Taliesin took his seat in Gwydion's left hand. To the right of Math stood an empty throne draped in the colors of King Pedri's royal house. On either side sat the Lords of Dawn, Cantreve lords, and war leaders. Circling the hall stood the banner bearers. Gurgi glanced about him in dismay, but at a gesture from Gwydion, stationed himself among their ranks. The poor creature looked miserable and frightened, out of his wits, and the stern warriors, but the companions turned encouraging eyes on him, and Cole gave him such a huge grin and a wink that Gurgi raised both his shaggy head and his makeshift banner more proudly than any in the great hall. Whew. Sorry, y'all. I'm in my room and I'm on my bed, so I'm getting comfy. So if it sounds like I'm drifting, it's okay. I'm fine. I'm just comfortable right now. I don't usually do story time in here, but it's fun. It's fun to get a change of scenery. Taran himself felt no little awkwardness when Gwydion signaled for him and the others to take seats among the war leaders, though Eilonwy, still in her warrior's attire, smiled happily and seemed altogether at ease. She remarked,
I think Hedwig shows up quite handsomely, and for the matter of that, better than most. You were so disagreeable about whether her eyes were blue or brown. Well, I could tell you that's not half as strange as the colors they've embroidered on some of their banners.
Eilonwy stopped speaking, for the portals were flung open and King Pedri entered the great hall. All eyes were on him as he strode toward the council table. He was as tall as Gwydion himself, and his rich raiment glittered in the torchlight. He wore no helmet. What Taran had seen was his long hair that shone like gold from his brow. At his side hung a naked sword, for it was Pedri's custom, as Fflewddur whispered to Taran, never to sheath his blade until the battle was won. Behind him followed falconers who were with hooded hawks on their gauntleted wrists, his war leaders with the crimson hawk emblem of the house of Pwyll broidered on their cloaks, and spearmen flanking his banner-bearer. Gwydion, clothed the chief bard in the unadorned garb of a warrior, stood to greet him, but Pedri halted before reaching the council table, and arms folded glanced around the room at the waiting Cantreve kings.
Well met, lords,
Prydain cried. "I rejoice to see you gather here. The threat of Anuvan makes you forget your own quarreling. Once more you seek protection from the House of Dawn, like fledglings who seek the hawk circling." Predri's voice rang with unhinged scorn. Tarn started at the king's harsh speech. The High King himself looked sharply at Predri, though when he spoke his words were measured and grave. "How then, Lord Predri? It is I who summoned all who would stand with us, for the safety of all hangs in the balance." Predri smiled bitterly. His handsome features were flushed, whether from the cold or from anger, Tard could not tell. Blood tinged Predri's high, jutting cheekbones as he threw back his golden head and unflinchingly met the High King's stern glance. "Would any have lingered, seeing himself threatened?" replied Predri. "Men answer only to an iron fist or a sword at their throats. Those who bear you allegiance bear it as it serves their own needs. Among themselves those country rulers are never at peace, but each is eager to profit from the weakness of his neighbor. In their secret hearts, are they less evil than Aurora Deathlord?" Shocked and angry murmurs arose from the Candrive lords. Math silenced them with a quick gesture. Then Gwydion spoke. "It is beyond any man's wisdom to judge the secret heart of another," he said, "for in it are good and evil mixed. But these are matters to ponder over the embers of a campfire, as you and I have often done, or at the end of feasting when the torches burn low. Our deeds now must safeguard Prydain. Come, Predri, son of Hwyl, your place awaits you, and we have many plans to set." "You summon me, Prince of Dawn," Predri answered in a hard voice. "I am here to join you?" "No, to demand your surrender."
Dun dun dun. And that is where we will end for tonight. Thank you all so much for joining me, y'all. Like I said, this was a little different. As you can see, my little companions, Totoro. We got Dumbo behind me. Got my teddy bear from college, Alphonse. And then Wolfie over here in the corner. He's hiding. He's awesome. But I hope you all have a wonderful day. And I will talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.